Welcome to Open Door Veterinary Collective's new quick conversations as we explore solutions to address barriers to accessing pet care and resources in your communities. I'm Amy St. Arnaud with Open Door Veterinary Collective, and today we are joined by Dr. Janet Hoy-Gerlach, who's our Director of Veterinary Social Work at Open Door Veterinary Collective. She's going to talk about how human service, social services, and healthcare organizations can be our critical partners with animal welfare in intake diversion and surrender prevention. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started.
First of all, many thanks to Maddie's Fund for hosting this and giving us an opportunity to take a look at this. Typically, when folks think about human services and animal welfare and what they have in common, it's often the link between violence toward animals, violence toward people, or crises, abuse, that kind of thing. And that certainly is one part of it. That's not the piece we're going to look at closely today. For more information about that, the National Link Coalition has a wonderful breakdown by state, and then you can dig deeper for information. The link refers specific areas: domestic violence, elder abuse, child maltreatment, animal abuse, and then you see in the middle, often these are co-occurring. I also added many times there are, and I'm not talking about egregious, intentional, specific harm, but when there's lack of resources, disproportionality in how supports are allocated, that certainly can cause issues. There's a wonderful sort of groundswell of a new way of approaching this called mandated supporting. And a lot of it is coming out of California, LA County, which, if you didn't know, you're right with me until very recently, that LA County has a population that's bigger than 40 of our states. So they're doing some neat things there. The common ground that we're going to look at today is that around keeping people and pets together. People and pets who are bonded, who, for whatever reason, a disruption of health, of economics, natural disaster, all sorts of things can disrupt a human-animal family temporarily or even longer term. And animal welfare has been absolutely rocking this in terms of working with both ends of the leash. I've heard wonderful terms: surrender prevention, adoption retention. Both of these focused on, well, if we can help the person get, what they need to be healthy, help them find the resources for housing, not, change your whole service model, but become more proactive and partnering with human service resources to help that animal stay out of the shelter is the approach that I'm seeing more and more. And of course, also a decrease in neglect due to people not having the information or resources they need, and then sort of the gold star of what we're all hoping to do, which is to support well-being, animals, community, human, all together. Human services, on the other end, we are not doing anywhere as near of a good job in terms of addressing both ends of the leash. So when does it usually come to human health and social service attention that there is a non-human animal, we'll say pet, or maybe multiple pets in a family? And recent statistics have suggested, or stated rather, 66% of households in the US report of having at least one animal, and most of those are saying their animals are family. So this isn't a niche sort of group, a little niche of, people who are pet keeping as a hobby or something. Certainly there's some subset of people with that, but this is the majority of folks who use healthcare and social services are likely to have animals as family members. And yet the majority of human healthcare and social services, we do not ask if people have pets, let alone if they have any concerns with pets. So when does this come up? It usually comes up during some sort of crisis. And often the crisis relates to the person refusing a needed service because their animal's needs are not attended to. And at that point, it then in the health and human service purview becomes a people problem. We would probably many in this group argue it's all a people problem, and animal welfare is another kind of human service. I was talking with a group that had some thoughts about that, and I asked how many of them, how many of the calls that came in did they think were from dogs and cats? I was quite serious asking for spay neuter services, and that kind of drove the point home. This is indeed humans being served. So I highlighted the ones, that's sort of the big reason, but some of the others, to reduce stressors for people. They may be undergoing financial stress with their pet expenses, not being able to afford veterinary care. Maybe their housing is at risk because their animal is barking or urinating or something. When the person does not want to lose their animal and they are forced, and by forced, I mean due to dire circumstances, it is trauma, it is grief, it is loss. And so some organizations on the human side are aware of that, attempt to change that. Sometimes it's staff by staff rather than the organization itself. So you'll find staff some staff that will be very aware, other staff that may not be at all. And then I have ethics here. Ethically, we are called to, kind of be person-centered or client-centered, patient-centered. So put the person's perspective at the front of what we're doing, not because we're an animal person, that certainly helps. But if that animal is part of that person's family, then we ethically are called to honor what the person says is their social network and important to them, and try to be respectful of that. And then kind of the correlate to the supporting well-being on the animal side. We're trying to keep those benefits, and there's a good amount of science now that shows physical, social, psychological, emotional, human health benefits. Look up Healthy Bond for Life and the American Heart Association. That's the cardiologists' public-facing group, and it's a whole public health campaign about how having pets is good for our heart health and our well-being. So back to this common ground, but not a lot of connection. This here is an actual news article. A travel nurse in the ER of Fort Worth, Texas, had a person refusing admission in dire health, thinking about leaving against medical advice. Why? No place for dog Charlie to go. This nurse made the news because she took Charlie and fostered Charlie and eventually returned Charlie. So for this dog and the person who was attached to Charlie, this was a happy outcome. Unfortunately, this is not a sustainable model. It's not a model hospitals and healthcare systems that at this point encourage that I know of. And yet the article goes on to describe this is not atypical. And I can certainly vouch. I get many emails from ER social workers in particular. I'm a social worker by training. with this kind of situation. Here is example number one of a way that working across the sectors ended up with a solution. So on the left, this actually was a neurologist, University of Michigan, same issue in their ER also, but this neurologist was having people with acute strokes leaving ERs or, refusing, admit outright, if they went through the ER triage and were told you just had a stroke, you have to be hospitalized because they had no one to care for their pet. Realized this was a bigger picture issue than any, one worker could handle, reached out to Michigan Humane, and they partnered to create safety net fostering, which is short term, pretty much, what you would think of. If you see toward the bottom, try to exhaust the person's natural supports first. Do they have a friend? Do they have a neighbor? Do they have a family member? If the other organizations that help them have talked with them about their pets, that may be something in place, but because that typically does not happen, it's again at the time of crisis. But fortunately, at least here, this is one example. And it does get full, and they have to reach out further. The remainder of today, before we get to question and answers, what are the main types? The gatekeepers. There's lots of different services, so I want to focus in on what are the main ones that we can make headway with. How do we find them? How do we engage with them? Okay, here's the main types, and important to know is they may be the first to encounter the pet need, again, often in crisis, but they may not know where to turn. They may not think to call the Humane Society or animal control or things where we might wonder, well, why wouldn't they? Well, it's, they think of that as, well, you go there to adopt, or if you have a stray animal, that just may not make the connection. And this is by no means an exhaustive list of the kinds of pet issues that come up, but just the most common from my experience in talking to people in these sectors with animal welfare, correlation of animal neglect and abuse that can happen, health, mental health. This includes addiction. You may hear it called behavioral health, crisis fostering, people not being able to go into rehab or detox because they don't have someone to look after their animal, housing. This includes shelters, short-term housing, again, crisis fostering, but also other supports. That person may be eligible for what's called an emotional support animal, which would have them under the Fair Housing Act entitled to have that animal in no pet housing, but no knowledge about how to do that. Pet food supplies, and then domestic violence, we'd hit a bit with the link, co-sheltering, foster, working with abuse, pet protection orders, and then adult and senior protection, neglect. Adult self-neglect is a huge problem, and if a person is neglecting themselves, they're often neglecting their pets too, and it's not intentional, but rather due to lack of resources, decrease in functional ability, which is why I have care help. Hoarding also tends to occur for some reason in midlife and older adults, so that can crop up there more. So how do you find them in a hurry? 211, 3 numbers. Many of you may have heard of it. Some of you may not have. It is, you just call it right into your phone. You will get an operator that can connect you with the closest. There's, I think, 40 some regions. There's a national office, and then they have local databases you see the different kinds of resources listed below, but it gets way more, you're with a family and, the person doesn't have shoes, or they need coats, they're dealing with the utility shut off. I used to have a Rolodex when I was doing street social work outreach, and it was a pain because like agencies would have a grant for something and then the money would run dry and then somebody else. So my little Rolodex was always, tattered and crossed out, and they keep this continually updated. And you can call them, you can give this number to people, you have it in your weight room or your lobbies, intake areas, and that's a little tip I have on the side. So if you need something in a hurry, you need child protection, you need adult protective services, tell them where you're at. They will look it up for you. I mean, certainly, of course, there's the direct local number, but if you're like, I can't find that paper, or like, I can't look in they will help you. And it's 24/7 and it is free. Also, many of them connect to housing shelters, housing resources. What they don't do is emergency. So they're not 911, they're not 988. If you're in a situation where you feel like you need to connect with mental health help, and it's feeling possibly emergency urgent, there's always 911, of course. However, there's also now 988, which will connect you to the closest local 24/7 mental health help. You can put them on speaker, and you now have live mental health professional backup that's connected to your local police, your local 911, and can help you talk through a situation with somebody. When I'm teaching a social work class, I tell all of my students to have these two numbers. I've used a 988 for backup. It's just nice to have another head. Plus, you're in a different profession, most of you. This can give you support right on site, and of course, they can escalate things as needed. How can they find you? We actually have a database now, we being Open Door Veterinary Collective. We partner with 211 and United Way. It's called Pet Help Finder, and accessible veterinary services, affordable, or as we call financial friendliness, that it has payment options other than a hard credit check, so that people have a way to afford the care. Food and of course supplies, crisis fostering. You can be listed, it's free. Another tip is uploading your info, keeping it updated. Beyond crises, of course, that's how you're going to meet people and get names, introduce yourself. That's like the beginning of relationships. But how about ongoing? Start at home. Email your staff, your volunteers, your board members. Ask who has connections to, the human service organizations, which ones, hospitals. Get a list, get some email intros to a person. If it's a pet lover, even better. And then sort of have your spiel. What do you do? Ask what pet needs they've encountered, suggest some ways you may be able to work together. You now have a connection, a live person. Other gatekeeping, it's more cold calling, but the hotlines, talk to the actual person who answers, same thing. Introduce yourself, get their name, say what you do, your organization, offer to provide some resources, speak at a team, ask for a supervisor name, follow up, same thing. 211 and 988 can get you to most all of these, but I would do the same thing with the crisis mental health, the housing, shelters. If you're able, you could have volunteers do this even if you don't have the staff time. Local ERs, if you're out, you could stop by. If you're doing training, if you're actually invited to a meeting, minimally these 3 questions. We actually have Ask About Pets initiative that Maddie's has funded to work with health and human service providers to be pet inclusive proactively before that crisis where everybody's kind of racing around trying to figure out what to do with, Charlie, the dog, because this person's just had a heart attack but is refusing care. The three questions: do you have any pets? Is your pet helpful? Any stressors, and who can help? And ideally, not leaving this on the worker's shoulder, but encouraging places to put them in their forms, their intake forms, their who do you live with. That's a lot of, you'll be hearing more about that piece. And then the staff connects. I can't overestimate this. Again, if you're not sure about a situation, call the elder or child abuse hotline. Just say, hey, I'm Janet Hoy-Gerlach. I'm out, on a call. I'm, a cruelty investigator with X, or I'm an ACO with, or they may not even know what ACO is, but I just wanted to run a hypothetical situation by you. If X, Y, and Z was happening, what would you suggest? And maybe it's not even that you're worried about reporting it, but like, are there resources that I could help this older adult or this, family with the kid? And thank them, and again, sort of extend, I'm so-and-so. If you ever have any pet questions, feel free. You can do that with the 988 staff. We like it. I meet colleagues, like when we've gotten calls like that, and I do it. I actually call child protective. I call adult protective services. I've been in practice for 30 years. It's just good. It's good to consult. And again, it's a person to person. Now you've got a name. Other simple ideas, actually less simple ideas. These are maybe a bit more labor intensive, but you could have a social work intern. Look at your schools of social work in your area. You want to find the field director or the internship director, but if you just find some kind of director and say, hey, we'd like to have an intern, can you tell me more? That could be part of the internship for them to help you build these connects. Less labor intensive, post in the local Facebook social work groups, nursing groups. There's community events like NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness Walk, Out of the Darkness Walk for Suicide. There's domestic violence support, all autism, all sorts of walks where people bring their dogs, have a doggy water stand. There's usually other booths. So first of all, have your stand, talk to the attendees. Secondly, go to the other booths and you will find healthcare and social service people. So what you're looking at is an asset map. If you're in a smaller community, look for what you have. Look at what we would call proximate individuals, maybe the individuals who are already the helper, associations, maybe you have a groomer, a vet, somebody who has extra barn space, and start building relationships that way. Information on that will get out in the discussion room or discussion thread. Ask about pets. We are going to be launching webinars specifically focused on health and human service folks, but absolutely would love to have animal welfare folks attending as well. That will be, there's a link that will be put up that you can actually sign up for information. And to find that, you just go to Open Door Veterinary Collective, our main web page, and then go to resources. And that will take you to the page where you'll be able to sign up for more information about that. We also have guidelines that are coming out through research that was funded by the ASPCA specifically for social workers working in animal shelters full-time. That's another thing that's been happening. Those will be coming out later this year, and we will absolutely be blasting those. So we'll be getting those out to you. And then I have a couple resources here. Open Door Pet Help Hub that you can share with human service providers, and an emotional support animals resource page that's for anybody. And As feared, I ran over, but what questions do we have?
So we do have a question that came in about an animal shelter that's at full capacity for most pet types, and their community fosters are also at capacity. So they've asked the community to do fostering for people going into the hospital or their treatments, etc. And most of them have come from their fostering families. So if you can't find extra fosters in your community and your shelter and the foster families are full, how do we help folks in this situation?
That might be where that asset map I popped up real fast. Looking again at our community and who else do we have who might be interested in supporting? Do we have groomers, daycares, any boarding? Who am I missing?
Do you want to talk about Best DB&B at all?
Best DB&B is a national resource. They actually work with communities to build crisis foster networks, and they provide the software. And there is a fee attached, but they do look for sponsorships to help offset that. So that is, if you look up Best DB&B, it's like a Airbnb sort of, catch on the name. If you're like, I can't, well, what was the name? It's Best DB&B.
I believe they
Yeah, and
just made their first connection with the human hospital, right? So they'll be working
yes, they
directly with the
did.
human hospital, yeah.
So they're doing a great job and can definitely be a resource builder. People that sign up through Best DB&B can charge and make money as pet sitters if they so choose. So it actually even could be income generating for people in the community. Some people don't charge. I mean, it's up to the individual sitters, but that's definitely a way to help build capacity.
And then,
Churches, actually, family promise, some churches will allow families to stay with pets. There's one in Cincy that has since developed a whole sort of pet center, but again, it's sort of out of the box places that, pet lovers are everywhere. And finding it's, you don't have to work with the pet lover to get, the services to connect, but it sure does make it a bit easier. So I thank all of you for spending this half hour, and I look forward to continuing to look at this with all of you. More questions, more comments, please go on discussion board. I will be there eager to respond, and I will not be talking, so you will have much more opportunity.
we like when you talk, Janet. That's the thing. You have so much to say. We run out of time. So we'll be continuing to do more of these. Janet's got so much great stuff to share. So thank you for doing this. And so she will be available at Maddie's Pet Forum. Continue the discussion. Please, we want this to keep going. We're going to be putting out more resources. We're really delving deep into this with the support of Maddie's Fund, who really also wants to see more of the connection between human services and animals. So we'll be seeing a lot more on this. But in the meantime, please join us for our next session, April 22nd. Heather Kanisa with Open Door is going to be talking how to multiply your existing donor dollars for veterinary care in your community. And I know this is a hot topic too. It's like we've got all these great ideas, but how do we get the money? So she's going to be giving some really great ideas on how to expand that as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. You will be getting this recording and copies of these slides tomorrow. So we really appreciate you taking the time, and have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all so much.